Hi everyone, I'm Louis. I'm a software developer at Odoo for about half a year now. But before joining Odoo, I spent about a year and a half developing my own product. So a mobile app, which in short allows you to manage recipes and generate shopping lists from those recipes. So it has a few additional features to organize your shopping list, to, for instance, share recipes, rate them, etc. The whole idea of my product was to make it as flexible as possible, because I'm kind of an organized shopper. So you might have guessed it by now, but I won't be talking about Odoo, but rather about what I learned from this experience, developing my own product. My talk will be kind of organized as a series of tips that I think can be useful for anyone who wants to go on a similar journey. So I won't focus too much on what I built, but rather on what I learned and on the different steps involved in the process. And you'll notice that some of the concepts I'll talk about have already been said by Antoine and Stan earlier. And luckily, we do agree more or less, so that's good. So, let's dive in. First thing first, what do you want to build? So, in my opinion, it's easier to build something you care about for several reasons. I mean, one of them being you will be more motivated to carry on if things get tough, and to be honest, things will get tough, because you're doing something without necessarily having revenue. It will be highly uncertain. And if you're not getting paid and you're working day in, day out, you're probably not 5, 8 hours a day. So yeah, you will get demotivated at some point. You'll potentially be working alone, so it will be hard. It's also, well, more fun to work on something you care about, and you'll be just less likely to regret it if it doesn't turn out to be working in the end, if you can't make money or a living from it. Second idea, I think it was mentioned before, but do talk about it. I heard quite a few other people who were developing their own products, and they were very reluctant to share about their idea. Thing is, they're probably scared that people might steal it, but I would advise against keeping it to yourself. Well, first of all, talking about it before even building it gets you a lot of inputs, a lot of opinions from different people. You might even ask other startup founders about their opinion on your idea. So it gives you this valuable insight. And additionally, I mean, honestly, if someone wants to steal your idea, they could just copy whatever you did after you launch it. So it's not worth it, in my opinion. And then lastly, I recommend you have a plan. What I mean by that is you should have some goals that you set so that you know where you're going, so that you know whether you're still on track with what you want to achieve. So, for instance, I started my product while I was still employed, and at some point I quit my job and I started working on it full time. So before I quit my job, I didn't really have a plan. I was like playing around, see where it goes. But at some point, if you don't have a salary, you kind of need to know where you're going. You need to have a plan. You need to have some goals, so say number of users, or some revenue, something that is measurable, and then you can say, okay, I've managed to reach this milestone, let's go to the next, or say, okay, this is not working, let's drop it and try something else. Now I want to talk about when to launch. This also been mentioned, but as soon as possible, right? You don't want to focus, you don't want to spend like days on end, I mean, years on end developing a perfect product with like lots of features and launching it, well, kind of in the not knowing how it's going to turn out, and then having nobody that uses it. That would be like a massive waste of time. So I'd recommend launch as soon as possible, essential features only. In my case, there was just this recipe management tool, so have some set of recipes, and then this shopping list generation tool, all of the sharing, and maybe fancy sign-in methods. Those are accessory. Those are not what my product is about. Those are extra features, right? And then something else that kind of goes into the same bucket, but don't launch a perfect product. It doesn't have to be necessarily unit tested, unless you have something incredibly complex, of course. It doesn't have to be documented. It doesn't have to be perfect. Your design might still be open to modifications, because again, you want to get something out there as fast as possible. so that you can get feedback as fast as possible. That's you could potentially be wasting a lot of time, so go fast. And then I'm basically saying you to build a product that's not very nice, doesn't have that many features, potentially some bugs, but you can kind of afford this because your beta users, your first users, are aware of this, and either they are, well, needing what you built a bit more, so they're like, okay, this is new, so I can kind of accept that it's less fleshed out and that it still is going to be improved. Or they're just like, you have people who are just tech enthusiasts and who want to find out the newest products fast, even though they're bugs. So they know they're beta users and they will be more indulgent with you. So now let's dive into the core of this presentation. It's once your product is kind of out there, you launched it, you'll probably realize that, well, your user rate, your growing rate is not quite what you anticipated. So you don't have that many users. And now is your time to get feedback from those users. And one way of doing this is via small feedback loops that go in 3 steps. So first step is you build something, you improve your product. For instance, let's say you have a messaging app, right? You're going to focus on text messages first. And so that's what you launched. And now you want to improve it. So you want to add support for sharing images in your messages, for instance. Then you measure the impact of that feature. So what I mean by that is you want to, for instance, know whether it improves, well, whether we have bigger usage in your app, whether more users use it, whether users spend more time in it. And then you learn from it. So with this data that you collected, you will see, okay, this is a good idea or a bad idea, and maybe I should use that information for a next iteration. So let's walk over this again, and maybe a bit more in detail. So it all starts with like a hypothesis. So basically, you think that adding support for images is going to increase your user base, or at least make them spend more time on your application. Then you test that hypothesis via an experiment, and I would recommend A/B testing, which was shortly mentioned before. For those who are not familiar with it, it's a way of testing where you can release your feature to one group of users and not to the other. And it allows, for example, to factor out external factors. Let's take the example of an application for hikers, say. You release your new feature, your fancy new feature, you type it, you release it on a Friday evening, great, week's done. Then on a Saturday, it's nice weather, it's a holiday, people are outside, and they use your app way more than on that Friday or Thursday before. So you might be tempted to think, oh, great, this feature improved actually my usage rate, but that doesn't take into account that it's a nice day and it's the weekend. So with A/B testing, you kind of factor that out, these external factors that might kind of trick you in thinking something that didn't occur like that. And then lastly, you learn from it. So you are supporting images, great. Now you say like, okay, this works fine, people are liking it. I will start supporting other kinds of documents as well. And since the previous one worked, you have some confidence into thinking that this one will work as well. So you should do this all in small increments for obvious reasons. Well, first of all, you want to learn. You want to get this quickly. And you want to learn new things quickly to know what to build. And also, if you launch all your features together, you actually will not be able to tell which feature contributed to which change in user behavior. And a small little note I forgot about the previous one. So this whole idea of this build, measure, learn feedback loops comes from a book called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, and I'll link it on the last slide, so don't worry, I'll have time to take notes. And lastly, be efficient. So what I mean is you have a business that's not yet sustainable at this point. You're just trying to figure out what to build, and that's perfectly fine, right? But you're not making revenue, so you need to be efficient, and doing so by focusing on features that actually provide some learning. It's better to have a feature that decreases your usage than to release a feature that actually provides no learning at all, like aligning an image to the left or the right, or something that doesn't provide any value, any learning. And I want to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about users. So obviously, goes without saying, you should know your target audience. So some people are tech savvy, others not. Some people like design, others just care about the functionality. And you should know who you are targeting. If you're making a product for older people, okay, I'm citing with a bit of a stereotype, but you might want to focus on simplicity. If you're targeting visually impaired people, contrast or font size are things that actually matter, where it might be accessory for another kind of app. And so, next tip, still about users. So, you should not guess what to build, but you also should not necessarily ask your user. Why? Well, typically in a startup, you're building something very new, right? So the user doesn't necessarily know what they want. They maybe can't tell you very clearly what they want. And if you just listen to your users and you implement whatever they tell you, you will have a very specialized product that goes into all kinds of directions that will satisfy this need for user A, this other need for user B. It will make no sense at all and be a complete mess. So I would recommend experimenting. The actions of your users are probably better indicators of what they really want than what they tell you, or obviously than guessing. And then next, these regular users that you're targeting eventually, they're less indulgent. They want a product that will work fine with nice features, and not too many bugs. So you'll want to focus on producing a quality product at some point. Sooner than later. Just a quick note about if it doesn't work. So you'll have noticed that my whole talk is kind of about efficiency and not losing too much time, right? Because you're not generating revenue. You're not there where you want to be yet. So this is the same for, well, if you don't make any progress through your feedback loop, if you don't get any learning, so you're going nowhere basically with your product, well, maybe it's time for a bigger change. Maybe change some assumptions, right? You think that your main feature is something, well, maybe it might be something else. You target certain users, well, maybe you should be targeting another user base that's actually more relevant to your product. So don't be afraid to make big changes, or even if it really doesn't work out, drop it. So my next section is about how to grow. I'm not going to talk about like business models here. I'll leave it up to you on how to want to monetize your product, if you want to monetize it. But rather about how to attract new users. And again, my focus will not be on like all the different methods of attracting users, but just the few little things that you should consider early on, because, well, they will have this a big impact early on in your journey. So first of all, it's quite obvious, but do learn to pitch your product. So you are doing something that not many people are doing, and you will get questions, obviously, for friends, family, colleagues, all kinds of people. So that's actually a great opportunity to learn to pitch it in a few minutes, to build some interest, to spread the word about your product. And there's also platforms online like Product Hunt. I don't know if you've heard from it, but it's a platform specifically designed for people who create stuff. So you can pitch your product, announce your launch date, kind of hype people up before your launch, stuff like that, and you will reach other creators, other founders of startups, as well as potential beta users, etc. So that's a great thing to know they exist. Next one is team up. So you should indeed decide early up what you want to team up. In terms of your user base, well, teaming up will lead to a larger user base because you will have more network connection. It will also lead, not related to users, but to probably more informed decisions, since you will discuss them with your co-founders. It's simply, if you're like me, it's simply be more motivated to work as part of a team as well. Next up, partnerships. So Antoine mentioned this a bit earlier as well, but it's important to build partnerships because they can get you revenue and visibility early on, right? When you're still figuring out what to build and how to build it. This can be, for example, if you're building an app for, say, bikes, like a cycling map, you can go to your local bike rental or sales shop and try to get a partnership there, because then you'll have this extra visibility. Or you could just contact other creators, other startups, or even influencers who have the same target users as you do, and they might be happy to help you out. For instance, I contacted an influencer. They did a post about my product, and in exchange I linked to their Instagram page. So yeah, there's this extra network exchange that you can make. Do be careful though, especially for this B2C product that I built. If you tailor your product too much to a specific partner, you might build actually some niche products, which might be less useful to your other users. So careful not to go too deep in your specialization to satisfy your partners. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention incubators. I haven't tried them myself, but it's good to know that they are there, I think. They offer all kinds of resources, office space, coaching, financing, sometimes co-founders, visibility, everything to make your business grow, basically. Yeah, they made some big companies. I mean, I think Airbnb, to mention one, has been in an incubator before launching. So yeah, and they often ask us in exchange, well, depending on which incubator, in exchange for like a percentage in your company. Something to think about. I didn't try it, as I mentioned, but it's good to know that they are there. So that leads us to the end of what I wanted to talk to you about. I'll just leave you with a more ethical thought, which is, should it be built? So you should ask yourself the question whether your product is actually useful. Does it solve some customers' needs, or does it instead waste their time? I think there's quite a few products out there who are actually do not satisfy those conditions. And in my opinion, you have a responsibility towards your users to not make them waste their time too much. I mean, of course, if you're going to build a game, it's different, right? It's not time wasted, but you have to think about this. And as promised, here's a link to the book that I mentioned throughout this talk.